this episode of Artist Tales, I'd like to welcome Tinsel Edwards. She is a painter and multidisciplinary maker who blends autobiography, activism, humour, and a fierce sense of commitment to visibility. Tinsel draws on her own lived experiences, from motherhood to the everyday pressures of domestic life. She explores bigger systemic issues, from the housing crisis to feminism to economic precarity and the politics of who gets seen, heard, and valued in the art world. Welcome, Tinsel.
Thank you very much. Wow, that was interesting listening to the introduction. It was exciting.
You're such an interesting artist, so tell us a little bit more about yourself and your artwork and what you do, really.
Okay, so I am Tinsel Edwards. I'm an artist based in Glasgow. I moved here from London in 2017 with my family. I've got 2 children. I've got a lovely studio in Glasgow with an organisation called Outer Spaces. And I also work for the art school in Glasgow School of Art, which is very exciting. And what I do as an artist is predominantly I'm a painter. I absolutely love paint, and it's always been the thread that runs consistently through my practice. But I also use a lot of found materials. I've used all sorts of things like bed sheets, cereal boxes, old estate agent signs, all sorts of things. I like using things that I find in the street or things that are going to be recycled at home. And I've recently started using ceramics as well and a bit of collage. There's lots of different things, but it's painting that kind of ties it all together.
So what draws you to both the painting but also using other materials, particularly what you find sort of around you? So what draws you to that?
So lots of different things. In a way, it kind of started for financial reasons that I would end up, not being able to afford lovely new linen or canvas from the art shop and finding bits of wood on the street or things, I've always worked in different studios. There's always people putting stuff out and you can go and see what there is in the corridors and things or in the local skip. But then a few years ago, it became more about the story that's connected to those things as well. So it's like reusing, wanting to transform something that's been discarded into something new. It's a financial motive, but it's also becoming things that come from home. So my work since kind of 2018 has been very much focused on the domestic and responding to my experience of motherhood. So I've been using a lot of kind of cereal boxes where the kids get through so much cereal. So that's a really lovely thing to paint on. And yeah, they've got a story connected to them. It's something from the home. And there's also baby grows I've painted on, socks, T-shirts, like old clothing. And also recently I've been painting on old drawers that come from the Hunterian Museum in Glasgow. And I got them from a place called Glasgow Wood, which is where you can take wood and recycle it. And so I love the story, the fact that these old wooden drawers have, a history to them, that they've been in a museum and they've kind of possibly held old fossils and things like that. And I've now painted on them and they've become something completely different. So, yeah, there's lots of threads to just that one aspect of it, I guess.
I was going to say, you have the recycling, you have the affordability, you have, you touch on history, the history of an object, and the domesticity, if that's a word, of the object, but also repurposing or recreating something into something new. So there's a lot of, as you say, threads there.
Yeah, and I quite like the challenge of using different things. So like painting on a drawer or painting on a T-shirt, the fabric of the T-shirt absorbs the paint quite a lot. So it's very different to painting on a shiny surface or something. I like, the textures and the qualities, the material qualities of these different things as well. I like the challenge of it.
I can imagine, and I can imagine too how not only working with those different materials, but also how people then interact with the final piece of art. So how have people interacted with kind of what you've presented or what you've exhibited?
That's quite a hard question to answer, really, because I suppose it's so different for different people and everyone brings their own thoughts and experiences to an artwork when they see it. But I guess like something like a cereal box, it's like a universal thing that people have at home. So there is a sort of familiarity. And say like a baby grow, I used a couple of times. I made paintings where I stretched a baby grow over a piece of wood and then painted on it, but you could see the sort of poppy buttons as part of the overall image. And I suppose people will have their memories of putting baby grows on babies if they've had children. And yeah, I suppose the familiarity of these objects brings something else and lets people experience it in a different way than if it was just a canvas, I suppose.
I guess another way to ask the question is, has your artwork sparked any conversations with people who are coming to see it? And sort of what have people talked about?
Yeah, so many different situations where I've shown work, and there's the different bodies of work that I've made. But I suppose the current body of work that I'm making, and when I've shown that, people do find it funny sometimes. They sort of respond to a humour in it, and they might, I don't know, I find it very hard to imagine how other people would respond. I'm talking about conversations. I mean, with the housing work, there's this sort of housing crisis work. When I did an exhibition called The Poor Door, I curated an exhibition, and it was a group of artists who were all responding to a similar theme. I remember vividly conversations from that exhibition, but that was like 20 years ago now. 11 years ago, sorry. 11 years ago that I did that exhibition, but I remember vividly the conversations in that, and people coming and telling me how much their rent was going up and how they were having to move and being priced out of the area, and just really emotional, personal stories about how that housing situation was affecting them. And that was just from looking at the artwork. That was a group show, but I had my pieces in there, the estate agent signs. The motherhood work, there's been all sorts of different responses to it. A lot of conversations. I don't know, I use the yellow marigold gloves a lot, the sort of motif of that. And people seem to love the fun and the humour in that. But people just, everyone has a pair of yellow rubber gloves at home, probably. And they talk about that. Yeah, I guess they see some things that they might have at home or recognise the feelings that I'm talking about in the work as well. Because a lot of this work is about trying to sort of make the feelings and the emotions visible or tangible in some way. And I think, some people don't get that, but some people, identify with that and have a conversation with me if I'm showing work.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I think both those topics have a real emotional or emotive aspect to them in different ways that probably do overlap in some ways as well. I'm going to ask about both of them, but I'll start off with the housing crisis work you've done or the artwork you've done. What sparked that project? How did that exhibition come to fruition?
So I think I first made work about housing in 2012, and I'll just add to that my work always seems to respond to my own personal situation. It kind of feeds into it. So at that time, I'd recently become a single parent, and I was renting a flat in East London and just finding it really, really hard and hard financially. But I had already lived in London since 1998, and just over that, just a bit more than a decade, having seen the changes and the gentrification and how much more difficult it is to, cover the bills that were just increasing all the time. Yeah, so it's like a personal experience, but also it is just such a strong topic of conversation. At that time in 2012, everyone connected to the nursery, or my friends, people at work, everyone had a story about how difficult it is. And yeah, I just wanted to explore that and express it and try and capture other people's stories as well as my own. But I started out by making paintings of adverts in estate agents' windows. So it would, because I'd walk past so many estate agents and they've got this really grim looking image, really dark, and there's often just a sort of floral carpet or something and a bed in the corner, and the cost of the rent is really, really high. Like, I don't know what it is now because I left London 8 years ago, but it would be about 600 quid a week or something for a 1-bedroom flat. And you think, how is that even possible for someone on like an average salary? And then you read more and more stories about, foreign investment as well, and people from all over the world actually, buying flats off plan and never even living there, and taking communities apart because there's nobody living in certain areas, even though they own these properties, and they keep going up in value. And then there's like sort of multi-occupancy flats when people are all trying to squeeze into one room just to cover the cost of the bills. Lots of different things. But yeah, going back to the paintings, I just found it there was a humour in it as well, seeing what they were advertising and how much they were charging. So I just wanted to pick up on that and create paintings from that, of the interiors. So that's how it started in 2012.
And was it a collaborative work or was it a solo exhibition?
That was a solo work. So it started with the estate agent's images, the paintings from that. That was a long series, and they all became quite similar. And it was reduced to like a bed, a light bulb, and either a toilet or a sink. So it's kind of like the bare minimum of what you need. And they quite often in sort of dark blues or murky greens. It was a very sort of muted, dark, dingy palette. And then I moved on because I thought, I don't know if these are saying enough. And I moved on to creating estate agent signs, and sort of subverting the imagery from prominent brands of estate agents, but actually taking people's stories who they'd told me what was happening in their lives. And I kind of screen printed that onto the sign and subverted the imagery. And then this exhibition, The Pour Door, I thought, well, I'll see if any other artists are doing something about this because it's such a sort of prominent issue at that time. I'm sure it's much worse now, and there's many more issues that we're dealing with now. But yeah, it was really nice to get a group of, I think it was about 20 artists that joined in. And so it's called The Pour Door. And the Pour Door title comes from new developments. They often have an entrance for the affordable housing and an entrance for the sort of full price flats. And the Pour Door, it's like something that goes back to Victorian times in a way. It's like a sort of side entrance that's not quite as attractive as the other one.
I was going to say it's very Dickensian, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, and I did that exhibition and kind of brought it all together, and then stopped making that work after I moved to Glasgow. It felt it was time to move on.
But I find it interesting that you were producing that around 2012, that time period, because even now we're talking about rents, about affordability, about the cost of living crisis, and it's particularly acute in big cities like London, but you probably do get it in places like Paris or New York or Toronto or any other big city, cities. And, I'm sure too, there's rural poverty as well. So I think it's one of those things that even now, I think that type of work would still probably hit a nerve.
I think as well, it's about trying to create cities where everyone can live, not just rich people. And it did feel like London it felt like a lot of people kind of getting pushed out. Creative people notoriously earn less money, really.
True.
But yeah, it's just trying to retain like a diverse community. And if it's only ever going to be driven by wealth and money and greed, it is going to exclude people.
Yeah, and that's more detrimental than including people.
Yeah.
Now, I do also want to get on to your kind of artwork that explores motherhood and,
Yes, please. Yes, please. Yeah.
Great. In the domestic, environment. So tell me a little bit more how you're exploring that theme and, any of your projects.
Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. Just to sort of say about the housing work that it came to a stop because I started to feel like I'm looking at an issue and I'm almost making work that illustrates an issue. And actually, as an artist, I don't want to illustrate. I want to explore and express. I mean, it was expressionistic in some ways, but it became too sort of formulaic for me in a way. And then, we left London, started a new life in Glasgow, and I was really excited about being in a new place and getting to know different people and understand how the city works. And I'd had my daughter, and she was only 10 months when we moved, actually. And it was about a year after that I really started making the domestic paintings. And that's when it started with the cereal boxes. I just thought, I'm not going to do anything that I put too much pressure on myself. I'm not trying to, explore all the politics to do with housing, because it was getting so, it was getting too far away from the magic of making and of being an artist and of the unknown and the adventure of that. So my current practice is exploring the emotional complexities of motherhood, and I'm doing that through playful use of materials, experimentation and colour and paint, but with an emphasis on play. There is a recurring motif in this body of work that I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I refer to it as the squiggle character. It's kind of a loosely painted scribble or squiggle. It sometimes has arms and legs, sometimes has eyes, sometimes not, sometimes wears a little pair of boots. Initially, I brought this figure in as a kind of vehicle or device to explore paint, so paint application and colour relationships, but it does also hold a narrative. It's a self-portrait of sorts, but it could also represent all of us. It's about exploring different emotions. So, it carries a narrative. It's about the body. It's kind of about my body and what it feels like. And so I'm trying to express through paint what it feels like, what these emotions feel like, what it feels like to be in a body, but just through this kind of playful, gestural little character without actually painting a person or a figure. And it's referring to quite a few things. As a wider context, I feel the kind of darkness that's in the world at the moment. I feel it on an emotional level. I'm sure lots of people do. But the way that we have news, we're all kind of interconnected, and we get images from all over the world, and we're bombarded with all these terrible stories and looking at what's happening in America. And there's a lot for human beings to process at the moment. So, it's an emotional response to that, and then expressing it through paint. So it's kind of an embodiment. This little squiggly character is an embodiment of those difficult and challenging emotions in relation to the darkness that we're seeing, the kind of gradual creep to the far right that we see in our neighbourhoods, in our cities, and we see it globally, but we also see it closer to home, and it's frightening. It also is a much more personal thing as well, and it's about my own feelings as a mother and the complexity. I talk a lot about the complexity of emotions. So there's lots of amazing, wonderful emotions to being a mother, but there's lots of difficult ones and challenging ones as well. So in recent work, I've explored guilt, frustration, tiredness, and more recently, brain fog, which is actually also relating to experience of perimenopause. Also, I'm kind of asking questions in the work and exploring the mental load or the hidden burden that women primarily take on, and the sort of prevalent gender inequality in parenting. So the squiggle character is a playful, funny little thing, and it just allows me to explore and ask questions and process my thoughts and feelings about my own home environment, my life and being a mum, and also in response to the wider issues that we're going through in the world and the times we're living in. So, yeah.
So it sounds like, although it's kind of a playful thing, it sounds like it's also multi-layered.
Yeah, and it's kind of evolved in the work. It popped up a couple of years ago, but it's been evolving, and because I can think, well, the one about guilt, I thought, okay, I'll use green, and it's going to be quite a big squiggle, and it's going to have bare feet. And then another one is a different colour. yeah, so it's a playful use of paint, but it has got this kind of cartoony element. And I really want to keep pushing and developing it. Like, what does this character do, and different situations that it can get into. And yeah, I think, and making it in ceramic and in paint.
And how have people reacted to this character?
People seem to like it. I think they see it as quite playful and they see it as a bit of fun. But then when it's along with the title of the work, it gives a bit more insight into the narrative of it. People are intrigued by it. And some of the paintings that I've done actually look a bit dark rather than look playful. But it just depends how it comes out on the day. I try to be quite quick about how I paint it. But yeah, people seem intrigued and want to ask more about it.
It sounds like a lot of your work is about exploring, or kind of exploring, and that, well, I guess exploring or storytelling, or, kind of raising at times. I think it sounds like both with the work on sort of the housing crisis and motherhood, kind of where you're at, but also common experience. Many people, would face, it is very expensive. Living can be very expensive, particularly in bigger cities, but not just bigger cities, elsewhere as well. But a lot of people are mothers or parents or fathers, and it's that, I don't know. I guess I'm hearing quite an authentic voice of your artwork is kind of reflecting where you are.
Yeah, I think it's always done that, and I do really want to somehow capture my experience of motherhood. And hopefully it's something that other people would identify with as well, or, relate to. But I just feel it's important for me at this time to try and, get it out somehow, and not just by writing it down, or it has to be something that's made in paint or made in ceramics. And it often refers to things in the home, like, I'm making these tiny bits of Lego out of ceramic at the moment because there's lots of Lego around when the kids are small. Or I kept painting nappy bags for a period of time. Or, there's lots of different sort of objects that I'll kind of pick up on that are from around the home as well. But it's just kind of wanting to highlight the complexities of the emotions that come along with motherhood or parenting. But I do say motherhood because there is a feminist element to it. And I talked a little bit about the invisible load and the mental load. And so I'm asking questions in the work as well. But I just have this kind of compulsion to paint and make things, and I sort of can't really function properly if I don't do that. It's my way of processing the world and processing my thoughts and feelings. And
I would say that's probably a common theme with a lot of artists, having some form of art to process your thoughts and feelings. But I'm glad you raised the feminism, because I wonder too whether there's a thread throughout a lot of your work to do with feminism, because even with the housing crisis, it does disproportionately hit poorer people. And, if we start looking at demographics who tend to be poorer, it tends to be ethnic minorities, women, like I'm sure there's nuances, and it's not to say it doesn't affect men, but it kind of marginalizes certain, people within society. So I don't know, how do you feel about that? Do you think there's a kind of a thread of feminism throughout all of your work, or is it, something that kind of crops up in different ways with different work?
I suppose I've only really more recently become aware of it and actually wanted to make it part of the work. I think when I was doing the housing work, it's not something I was thinking about, or the work previous to that. But and it's a bit to do with being an artist mother as well. And my son's about to turn 16 now, but even then, when he was born, I was a bit reluctant to sort of, I don't know, you feel different as an artist if you can just turn up to the private views and meet people and network, and then it suddenly becomes actually you can't, because you are at home with your child, which is wonderful, but it does cut out those kind of networking opportunities when your child is younger. So, yeah, well, I was a single parent as well, so that was something slightly different as well. But yeah, the feminism, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but yeah, I think it's just it's a really strong thread in my work now, because I often reference artists from the past as well, and I've specifically researched female artists because of that whole thing about that they weren't allowed to show work or practice as artists, or weren't celebrated in the way that they should have been. It's changing now, but it's only really been very recent that is changing. So I make a conscious decision to find female artists that I might not have heard about and find out about their stories and find out more about their work. And I have, in some of my works, been really overtly referencing them by, in the titles that I use, it might reference a particular artist, or a brush mark, or a tiny bit of their painting. I'll actually physically recreate it and reference it within my piece. I love doing that because I feel like I connect with that person from years ago and think about what their life might have been like and how they were able to keep being creative and making work when the odds were against them. I guess it's quite an inspiring thing. So, I've recently done a piece inspired by Pauline Bote's last painting she made called Bum. It's not quite finished. I've been working on it for a few years now. But thinking about her life and how she wasn't really allowed to do painting at the Royal College of Art. She was advised to do glass instead. There weren't even female toilets in the Royal College of Art at that time. Yeah, so there's been a lot of pieces like that recently where I've chosen to study a particular artist and, really thought about what they were experiencing and tried to bring that into the work.
Yeah, and I think what you've described is probably a common experience for many, many women, previous generations, where actively discouraged probably to be artistic or to be artistic in a certain way and maybe pushed to doing other things. And I'm thinking too, not only just painters who were overlooked, but also writers who had to write under a man's name to get published. And as you were talking, I also thought of Emily Carr. I'm Canadian, so she was painting in the early part of the 20th century, around the time of the Group of Seven, who were a group of 7 men painters in Canada. And she was never part of that group because she was a woman, and she was very, very poor, and her work didn't get recognized until until after she died. And they were really struggling to preserve her painting because she couldn't afford very good boards to paint on. So it's probably it sounds really such a positive thing that you're throwing a light on these artists that otherwise, people aren't aware of. There's probably many artists that I'm not aware of, but I do appreciate when other artists or other people kind of shine a light on.
I don't know about Emily Carr, actually. She sounds really interesting. I'll have to look her up.
She's a very interesting artist. She did a lot of landscapes and worked, she was, we're also very much in touch with Indigenous communities in Western Canada and had a real respect for Indigenous communities. So yeah, I'll send you some information.
That sounds good. Yeah, say with Pauline Bote, she is getting a lot more recognition now, and her work sells for a lot of money, and she's very celebrated. But at the time she died, her paintings, I don't know, they got left. I think it was her brother had been storing them in a barn, and I can't remember who discovered them now, but they'd just been left in there, not really protected or anything, because they weren't thought of as anything interesting. So it was a shame that she didn't experience in her lifetime that actually she was doing a really interesting thing. She was one of the only sort of female perspectives in the pop art movement. It was only the male artists in pop art that we all are the household names. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's quite a common theme, I think, over the generations.
Yeah.
Sadly. Now, I'm going to kind of go back a little bit because I'm quite interested in some of the work you did fairly early on, like some of the collaborations you've done.
Mm.
And I'm also thinking about Twinkle Troughton,
Yes.
who I will be interviewing for this podcast as well.
Yeah.
So maybe you can talk about some of that work. And I know I think that was fairly early on in your career.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit more about that and how it...
Yeah. It's great to hear that you're interviewing Twinkle as well. So, yeah, we met when we were 9. So we went to primary school together and we lived together in London afterwards. We formed a band, which maybe we might get onto as well. But then we did a collaboration. It was Tinsel and Twinkle, and we did lots of different activities where it would be kind of street-based artworks. So we loved the idea of kind of taking it out of the gallery and interacting with people in a different way. Because I think to go into a gallery, you have to feel that you're invited. I think some people might feel that it's there is an elitism in art, and people might not feel that they can go and ring on the doorbell of a gallery. So we like the idea of taking it out onto the street and interacting with people and having conversations. So yeah, we did lots of different things. We did the Bank of Tinsel and Twinkle, which was all about, we had our own banknotes and uniforms, and it was all about the exchange of thought instead of like a currency, thought instead of currency. And we were asking people what they thought about money and how I don't know, just thoughts about money. And we collected all the banknotes that people had written on, and that was really interesting. We kidnapped a banker as well, and that was around the time that RBS had been bailed out by the taxpayer. So we waited near the RBS in Liverpool Street to try and catch a banker. We kind of did, and yes, held them to ransom for a small amount of time in a gallery space. What else? Oh yeah, we fined cars as well. So we dressed as traffic wardens. That was the first piece that we did, which was 2009. So we dressed up as traffic wardens and we made these tiny little parking tickets. They were screen printed, and on the image, it was an image of Woolworths, and which had closed down because it was just the recession had hit in 2008. And on the little picture of Woolworths, it said, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." Which is an opening line from Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities. But the idea of that artwork was to say, recessions are difficult, bad times, but there could be something good coming. It's not always all negative. It's a period of revival. Yeah, so we went around and stuck these on people's cars, and we had the actual parking ticket bags. So people would think that they were getting fined, but they'd open it up and they'd have a free artwork. So yeah, it was really fun to work with Twinkle, but the distance now makes it a bit more difficult, and we're both really sort of focusing on our own practices. But yeah, it was, maybe we'll do them again. I'm not sure.
Well, it sounded like there was such like a lot of energy and some fun, actually, in a bit of a cheeky way.
Yeah.
I do have to ask, how did the banker react to the being held hostage?
So we did get moved on from RBS after a short while by the security guard, but so we sort of went round the corner. But this a banker that did work in there came up and we said, "Well, can we just kidnap you for a little bit?" So he was quite happy for it to happen, but we just put this like Hessian sack over his head and posed for a photo, and he was just laughing, thinking it was quite funny. But then actually, I don't know if I should tell you or not, but yeah, when we had the gallery exhibition, the banker was kind of a friend who said they would be the banker. But yeah, it was to sort of illustrate a point, I suppose. But yeah, he sat there for the whole time and he was kind of tied to a chair, but he was also raising money for the charity shelter as well.
So all good, all for a good cause. Yeah, no, that's good. Yes. That's good. I did also want to ask you about, actually, before I get on to Priced Out, you mentioned you were in a band. So I do want to ask you about that.
Yeah. So that was for 7 years. We started in 2000 and it finished in 2007. And that was the Four Fairies. So me and Twinkle, we're both artists. And there's also Tinky and Sparkle. But we're all from the same town, Leamington Spa in the Midlands. Twinkle and Tinky are sisters. But yeah, we basically grew up together, and yeah, it was during the time that we were at art college. We grew wings basically, and we had wings every day. for 7 years, and we would grant people wishes and hand out wish vouchers and get into all sorts of funny conversations and scrapes. And some people loved it and some people really didn't like it. But the band evolved from that. So it started out that we were the fairies, and then we thought, oh, well, maybe we could do a band as well. And we wrote lots of songs about our experiences of having fun, really. Yeah.
It sounds like a bit of a riot, to be fair.
Yeah, we'd have like coordinated dance routines, and we'd like coordinate our outfits. And one of our signatures was white stiletto shoes, which they were only about a tenner at the time. We'd have to get new ones every 6 weeks or something because they get completely trashed and stomping around the streets of London. And we'd like graffiti on them and stuff. So yeah, there were lots of different things. But we rehearsed every week, and we did lots of gigs in venues around London, and we organised our own tours to New York a couple of times.
Wow.
So it was the four of us, and it was 4 friends as well. So we were singing at the front, the 4 of us, and 4 friends were on guitar, bass and drums. So it was actually 8 of us altogether.
Oh gosh, a proper band. And what kind of music did you play?
I'd say it was quite punky, a bit kind of glam, very ramshackle, quite raucous, and yeah, loud, and yeah, high energy. And it wasn't about being perfect, it was about enjoying it, I guess. And the lyrics were all about, going out and having fun, or one of them was about being vegetarian, so we did have a bit of politics in there, but it was mostly just about having fun, really, in our 20s.
I think that's probably not surprising, but hey. I did want to touch on Priced Out. So was that a book that you wrote?
Yeah, so around the time that the housing work finished, so I was doing the estate agent signs, because I was also part of Dismaland, Banksy's exhibition, and I exhibited the estate agent signs at that. But some friends who have an independent publishing company called Dunlin Press approached and said, would you like to write a book about this, about your experience as an artist in London and how the housing crisis has impacted you, but also how you've made this body of work about it. So it kind of captured that period of time in my life, and I invited, in Twinkle's in the book as well, I invited other artists to contribute their own stories about what was happening to them. So yeah, it captured that whole body of work, and there's lots of images in it, and also, yeah, my own experience of what was happening.
That's amazing. And to sort of, I guess, sum it up in the book is probably quite a good thing. And I think for a lot of people, whether it's a published written book or even a photo book or other types of books, it's really nice to have something that tactile, I find.
Yeah, and because a lot of that work has kind of disappeared now, but and it's only a short book, but it really goes through all my thought processes of when I was making it, what the sort of creative decisions were, and it's so nice to have that all there, that it won't kind of disappear, and then my kids can read it as well.
Yeah, and it's something, as you say, it's something for them to hold on to and read as well.
Yeah.
Just kind of looking forward, and I'm just thinking kind of the last few questions. Do you have any upcoming sort of projects, or if you don't, or at least don't have immediate projects in hand, where do you think you're going? Like, how do you think the road ahead of you is perhaps going?
Well, I have made a conscious decision to not seek any projects at the moment, to not try an exhibit, I probably will enter a couple of things, but I really want to solely focus on making the work, and put all the possible energy I can into making, because I've spent years and years sort of trying to look for opportunities and sort of scrabbling around, and actually I don't want to, and I've also been an activist an instigator in a lot of ways. Like, I've often curated exhibitions, I've brought people together, I ran my own gallery for a few years with a friend as well. I've always kind of pushed to use my energy to bring people together, and actually I feel a bit tired from it now, and it's quite difficult to always be doing that. And I want all that energy to now just go solely into my making for at least a year, because I'm excited about my work and I want to see how far I can push it and, you know, really experiment and take it further.
That sounds, like quite a good, I don't know, I guess that's kind of self-focusing, isn't it? Like, that's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, I think I was spreading myself a bit too thin by always trying to do different things all the time. And like I launched some art classes last year, and it was great. It was art classes for teenagers, but the amount of work that went into trying to get people to come, trying to find a venue, covering the cost of all the materials and all these things. At the end of the first sessions, I thought, I don't think this is right for me right now. I think what I really need most is my work, and I want to commit to it so that, you know, I've sort of worked out a list of a few pieces that I want to make this year, and I will finalise that by getting it all professionally photographed and build up a portfolio and get my website much more updated. So yeah, that's my plan at the moment.
That sounds really positive. And as you were talking, and even over this episode as we're recording it, what I'm hearing is you're trying a lot of different things. And I think I am drawn to something like that because I like to try different things. And I think that's how I learn. And sometimes, like you said about the classes, you know, you try it, not quite for me, you know, or not now, but sometimes in the trying you learn a lot about yourself, but also, is this right for me? Is it right for me right now? Or can I take things away and incorporate that, even if it's not something I'll pursue?
Yeah. I think with my work as well, I've really changed my approach over the last few years. My actual practice is that I let the process lead. And if something pops up in my head telling me to make a little piece of Lego out of ceramic and paint it red, then I'll just do that. I won't think, oh no, but I know that's not going to do anything. Or like I've been making little fried eggs or, you know, painting the squiggle person. I let the work tell me what's next. And there is a lot of research that goes alongside it, but it's very much process led and enjoyment led. I try to go in the direction where it feels more fun, even though there's all these kind of political thinking that goes into it, and lots of different strands, I suppose, that I'm thinking about. It's primarily about exploring and experimenting and trying things and seeing where it goes. It's about an adventure.
And I think that's so important. Well, great. I really want to thank you. It's been wonderful speaking with you. So I want to thank you for your time and certainly talking about your artistic journey.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, it's really nice to have the opportunity to talk about some of the things that are in my head, talk about them out loud. It's really nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning into my conversation with Tinsel. Her work is testament to how art and creativity can challenge accepted norms and explore bigger systemic issues. More information about Tinsel is in the show notes. In the next episode, I'll be speaking with Twinkle Troughton, who has collaborated with Tinsel. Her work explores the English landscape and what has influenced it over the generations. You won't want to miss it.